Hello viewers, this is Charles and this is the next in my series Learn Programming and Game Development with Lua. So in the previous tutorials we've looked at all the main concepts in Lua. Now I'm going to start looking at the Love2D game framework. And in this tutorial I'm going to look at two things. I'm going to look at callback functions because we need to understand how those work to actually be able to do anything at all. And I'm going to look at drawing things to the screen in Love2D. And of course, drawing things to the screen is perhaps one of the more exciting parts of what we're doing. So let's get started. So what are callback functions? Callback functions are implemented by us, but they're not called by us. They're called by love.run when the Love2D game framework is run. And that's the critical distinction. We're not calling them, Love2D is calling them. Now the way in which game engines work is actually similar across game engines. Game engines use callback functions and they actually typically use almost the same callback functions irrespective of the engine. Typically they have a callback function called begin or start or load, and that does the setup that's required when the player runs the game. All game engines and game frameworks are going to have an update function, and that function updates various things on each frame. And then typically they'll also have a draw function to actually draw something to the screen. Then there'll be callback functions to handle user input, whether that's input from the keyboard and from the mouse or from a touch screen or a joystick. And finally you have a quit function or an end function, something that does all the cleanup when the game finishes. I've opened ZeroBrane Studio and I've created a new file and I've saved it as main.lua. Now you need to save it as main.lua, otherwise it's not going to run properly because Love2D expects the entry point for the game to be main.lua. So that being said, let's just write a comment at the top to say what this is going to be about. Now I've used Windows key semicolon because I want to put the symbol, and I've got it in recents, but if you're following me, so we're going to click on symbols, and then if you scroll down it has the Latin ones, and you can find somewhere in this rather long list the capital O with the umlaut. This is quite useful to know if you ever need to use accents, and you can see it is here. And then we can type VE, but before that let's just show you, it'll then remember it on the front page so you can quickly go to it, which is what I could have done here. Right, let's get rid of that. Now if you're on Mac you can simply do it by long holding O, and then it will pop up a list of special characters. If you're on Linux Ubuntu, I think you can use Control semicolon, and if you're on other Linux distributions you might have to use Control Shift, and then you'd enter U for Unicode and then hexadecimal number for the special character. I'm now going to write the empty callback functions and then we're going to implement the code. So we're going to start with love.load and then we're simply going to go end. Now if you're not seeing the autocomplete, you might need to go to the Lua interpreter, so project Lua interpreter, and switch that to the love. And the other thing you might need to do is to go to the project directory and set it from the current file. In fact, you will need to do that. Now if we run it, it should just run and we should get a black screen because, well, we haven't done anything yet. Let's just check. And that looks promising. Right, let's put some more in. The next one is going to be the update function. And this one needs the delta time, which I'll explain later. Then we need the draw function. Then we're going to have the mouse functions. So the first one is function, then love.mouse, and we want pressed. And then the next one will be mouse released. And then the keyboard functions. So I think we want key pressed. And the final one helps if you can spell function. Let's just crack that. There we go. So if we run this again, we'll get a black screen. Let's just check it. We'll get a black screen. Right, good. Now these are the main callback functions that you need to know. The next thing I'm going to do before I forget is to zoom in to make the code bigger, to make the font bigger, to make it easier to read. If you think that's still too small, put a comment in the comment section below, and then when I'm recording the next video, I can zoom it a bit further. But I think this balances being able to see plenty of the code on screen with making it large enough that it's not too hard to read. So the first thing I want to do is to change the background color to something a bit more interesting than black. Before I do that, I just want to show you the documentation. So I'm going to switch screens. So I've opened the love2d.org website in DuckDuckGo. I'm going to go to the wiki, which is where the documentation is, and I'm going to go to the love.graphics module because we're dealing with graphics and I would imagine that the background color's there. And then I'm going to look for background. Well, I know already, of course, that this is going to be set background. But there's the thing. Generally, you have a lot of set methods, and you can see here, set background color. And if you click on that, it gives you the details. So you have to pass red, green, blue, and alpha. So let's do that in code, and then I'll talk through it. So I'm now going to call set background color and then pass it a color. So let's go love.graphics and then set background color, and then I'm going to have 0 for red, I'm going to have 1 for green, 1 for blue, and 1 for alpha. So there you can see we've got a reasonably interesting color. Now let's try drawing a line. So that's quite easy to do. Love.graphics.line, and then we need to pass in x. Let's use 100 for x, 200 for 100 for first y, and then we're going to go to 200, 200. What this will do is to draw a diagonal line with a 45-degree slope. And you can see it's drawn it in the default color, which is white. So now let's change the color. So we need set color, and let's make it 1 for red. Let's have a little bit of blue. That's not blue, that's green. So let's have a little bit of blue and alpha of 1, and let's run that. And you can see now we've got a kind of dark red, crimson-y colour line. Right, good. So now let's talk about coordinates. So if I run that again, so we can actually see it. So coordinates start at 0 top left for x and 0 for y. And as you go across to the right, x increases, and as you go down, y increases. So 100, 100 is 100 pixels across, 100 pixels down, and 200, 200 is the coordinates of the last point, which is that one. By the way, you can also pass additional points to create a kind of polyline. In fact, let's do that by passing in, let's go just another 50 across, but we'll go down more on y, and that should give a steeper slope to the line, and you can see it does. Right, let's get rid of that because it's going to clutter up my screen, so we'll put it back to how it was before. Now I'm going to draw a very basic character based on the ellipse. So let's see what that looks like in code. So the first thing is we need the draw mode, which I want to fill. The second thing is we need X and Y, which is the coordinates of the center. I'm going to use 300, 300, and then I need radius, not 3,300, and then I need the radius X and radius Y, which I'm going to have the same. I'm going to use the same radius. I'm going to use 50, 50, and then close the brackets, and then let's draw that. That's a start, but I want to change the color to yellow. So every time you call set color, it changes the color that it's going to draw in. And from theory of color, I know that if I use 1 for red, 1 for green, and 0 for blue, and 1 for alpha, I'll get yellow. Now I'm going to draw 2 more but smaller ellipses for the eyes. So I'm going to make these smaller, and I've offset them slightly, so I put them up a bit, and this first one will be slightly to the left, and we can tweak it if we need to. Let's do the second one. So that implies 325 and then 320 and then 10 and then 10. But we also need to change the color. So what I want is black. So let's go love.graphics.setBackgroundColor. So we want 0, 0, 0, 1. So 0 red channel, 0 green channel, 0 blue channel, and full alpha. So we now should get 2 black eyes. And we have, but they're, well, a bit offset. So let's have a look at why that's the case. I can see the problem is this. We need that to be 280, or we need to rotate the character. Let's do that. So that fixes it. So we've got a character. But I think I'd really like this character to actually be defined outside of this callback function. I'm going to define it in a table at the top of the file. We did tables in the last tutorial, so that's a good reason for practicing them. So let's see what that looks like. So the first thing we need is, let's just call it character, and then we're just going to make an empty table. And if you recall, you make an empty table by just using the curly braces. Right, now we need to add the character's properties. So the first one we're going to have is the X coordinate, and then we're going to have the Y coordinate. So I'm going to set the key, which I put in square brackets, and that's going to be, it's this one, it's 300. I seem to have forgotten how to type. And then I need Y. It doesn't help, by the way, that the microphone's kind of in the way of the screen and the keyboard. Y, we need 300. Look, better. Then I need the size in X and Y. So let's go character, and then this time I'm going to use size X. And I'm trying to follow the naming convention used in Love2D, so I'm using camel case, if you recall the last tutorial. So that's going to be 50 and character, and then I actually want double quotations. I'll change the other one in a minute. And now I'm going to replace these here. So I'm going to go character, and I'm going to use object notation and then X, and then I'm going to go character and then object notation and then Y, and then character and then dot, and then size X, and then now notice I haven't made these local, although it would work if I did. So these are global. By having them global, they're then available in other files. So just to recap, we're using object notation. That's a notation where we use the dot operator to access the members of this object. And by members, I mean these parameters here. So this is a member, this is a member, this is a member, and this is a member. So you've got 4. If we run this, it should work just as it did before. And it does. Just a tip, I'm trying to follow, and it's a good idea to follow the naming convention of the framework that you're working in. It doesn't matter so much when you're working on your own, but if you're working with other people, then it's helpful to have a consistent way of naming things. So for instance, stick to camel case or stick to Pascal case. And what you definitely want to avoid is mixing them up. You want to choose one and stick to it. So this works fine, but I don't really like the way we've done this. I think this would be better if this was inside the load callback, and that's easy to do. So I'm just going to cut it and then paste it, and I'm going to leave a blank line, and then I'm going to put it here, and then we're just going to fix up. I think I can select it, and then I can probably go edit auto format source. Here we go, edit source correct indentation. That's the one, and we'll run it, and it still works. Good. Ideally, you'd probably refactor this, and you'd probably have a separate function to actually set up this character. I'm going to have a function called generateCharacter, and I'm going to put it at the bottom. So I'm going to leave a blank line, then I'm going to type function, and then I'm going to type generate and then character. And let's put the end in. I'm going to select this code, the bit that sets up the character table. I'm going to cut it, which is Control X, Command X on Mac. I'm then going to paste it into here. I'm going to correct the formatting, and then I need to actually call it. So all I need to do now is to type generateCharacter, and that will call it. And when I run this, I expect we get the same thing as before. And we do. I'm now going to give you an optional exercise, and it's a very simple one. The optional exercise is simply to add some additional entries into our table for the eyes. And you can do it by copying the method we've used here and then simply applying it for the last 2 ellipses. In the next tutorial, I'm going to show you how I would expand the character table to include the eyes. So effectively, we're generating what in programming terms is an object which represents our character. We'll also look at how you would animate that character to get it to move across the screen, because at the moment it's static. And as part of doing that, we'll look at how you use the delta time, which is what DT stands for, to make the speed of the animation consistent irrespective of what computer hardware or mobile hardware you're running the game on. I hope you found this tutorial useful. If you did, please click on the like and subscribe buttons. Have a great day.